A lot of the problems in the UK, you can attribute them to Islam. The extremists are all living in the UK. I completely understand, as a white Christian, why you would feel threatened by Islam. I don't care if it doesn't make me a real Muslim. It looks like I work for the Jews.
I am a revert, and I was taught how to pray Salah.
That means every single time I pray,
the person who told me gets the reward.
5 times a day, from Fajr to Isha.
If you want to support someone like me in learning Salah,
then sponsor 10 people for just £100 this Ramadan.
remember the Prophet, peace be upon him, said,
Charity does not decrease wealth. Click the button and donate now.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel and to donate to Salah Plus so we can help reverts learn how to pray this Ramadan. So Andrew Tate, the double agent, went on his first podcast since touching down on US soil, hosted by passive-aggressive anti-Muslim grifter Patrick Bet-David. Tate not only made false allegations that Islam is a problem in the UK, but also that the majority of British Muslims are extremists that condone grooming gangs. He also for his idols Donald Trump and Elon Musk as usual, while taking a much more pro-Israel stance when pressed on the matter by PBD's Zionist co-host. Let's look at the first clip where PBD does his usual cowardly covert demonization of Islam whilst desperately trying to bring Andrew back to Christianity.
First podcast we did, you were a Christian.
Yep.
Second podcast we did, you were a Muslim.
Yep.
Today, are you still a Muslim?
Yes.
You are. Okay. If you look at how many people in the U.S. convert from Christian to Muslim in America, it's not a big number. And if you look at how many women left, more women than men, I think the number is such a small, there you go, roughly 30,000 people a year convert to Islam in U.S. The difference is they have a lot of kids and they have big families, so that's their strategy. Majority of that 30,000 are women. But you, as a man, an anomaly, you go from Christian to being a Muslim. So when you were a Christian, what attacks or goods did you see that you're like, man, I never had that? Because I remember when we spoke when we were in Romania, you said, like, when I was at church, Muslims sent me letters, Christians didn't send me letters. I remember that conversation that happened. Now that you're a Muslim, what is the biggest difference of treatment, and does it kind of make you sit there and say, man, I understand why the Bible teaches tolerance for certain things?
Yeah, I understand the question.
What is the difference?
I understand the question, but tolerance is it's a double-edged sword.
I agree.
Because it's tolerance that's allowed Christianity and the church to end up mocked universally across the planet and to not defend their lands. And the Christian thing to do is to sit there and allow your life and your race and your country to be destroyed because it's the Christian thing to do. So tolerance is a double-edged sword. I was an atheist for a long time, and then I became a Christian. I reverted to Christianity instantly because I believed in God, and I was born in a Christian nation. Then I decided to do some research on the different religions, and I found affinity with Islam. Right. But my affinity with Islam is between me and God. Me trying to please every Muslim on the planet is never going to happen because I'm never going to be able to make them happy. And there's always some of them who are unhappy with me. And there is a contingent of Muslims who like what I say, and there's some that don't like what I say. And that's fine. I'm not here to try and appease them. I'm here to be honest to myself and be honest to my religion and honest to my faith and also be a rational actor and a rational human. And a lot of my views Muslims don't agree with because they throw their rationality away in light of group identity politics. And lots of people do this. It's not just a religious thing. We just talked about how black people did it with George Floyd and BLM.
Tate, would you, if one day in the future you're living, you're evolving, you're a guy that's evolving, you got core convictions, but you're evolving. One day gets to a point you're like, this is not changing. It's going to get worse and worse and worse, nastier on you. Do you ever fear, if you ever say, you know what, I'm going to be a Christian again, do you ever fear what would happen to you if you ever left the religion of Islam?
No, I don't. But I'm sure that would be a problem for them. I mean, I'm sure, I can imagine people getting angry if I did that.
I don't fear it if it...
No. If that's how I feel, then that's what I would say.
The fact that PBD had to get Tate to confirm that he was a Muslim is a reflection of Andrew's un-Islamic actions and statements since he reverted to Islam. PBD is so insecure about the validity of his faith, he thinks 30,000 people per year leaving Christianity for Islam in the US is a small number. On the flip side, the fact is that hardly any Muslims in America leave Islam to convert to Christianity. Also for us, it's not a contest like it is for PBD because we are completely secure in our faith. PBD also said that the majority of Muslim converts are women and that it's the birth rates that favour the growing numbers in Islam. Well, maybe you guys should start having bigger families and make your religion more appealing to women. PBD framed Christianity as a more tolerant religion than Islam in order to appeal to Tate to bring him back to the faith. This hilariously backfired as Andrew described this tolerance as a weakness that not only undermines traditional Western Christian values, but also the strict laws of the Bible itself, and hence cited this as one of the reasons why he chose Islam. I actually agree with Andrew that his faith is a personal thing between him and God, and that he doesn't need to appease every Muslim on the planet. But I disagree with Tate when he said Muslims throw away rationality due to identity politics, as he's totally projecting here. This is what Andrew does when he claims to be a nationalist when hating on immigrants. Islam is a religion for all races and all nations. Our identity as Muslims supersedes the identity politics of a race or a country or of any group due to our diversity. PBD then slyly tried to use the pushback that Tate has received from Muslims in recent months to imply that it's going to get worse, and then stooped to the cheap tactic of asking if Andrew fears the penalty of apostasy from Islam in certain Sharia countries. PBD either doesn't know or chooses to ignore that in Deuteronomy 13 in the Christian Bible, the same punishment is in place for apostasy as is cited in the Islamic Hadiths. And I will give credit to Tate here for not budging on his choice of faith. But I will also add, if anyone does leave the faith, it makes zero difference to Islam as a whole, because the fact is, Tate needs Islam, Islam doesn't need Tate. Let's look at the next clip where Andrew throws Western Muslims under the bus by falsely stating they support grooming gangs and extremism.
So you talk about UK, right? I lived in Germany at a refugee camp, and I saw who first time I ever got in my life was by another Afghani kid. It was in Erlangen at a refugee camp. We had a fight. Boom, he took it out. Well, I'm like,
This sounds about right.
I look at stats. 2023, the top name, the number one name in UK, London, is Mohammed.
Correct.
Okay, that wasn't the case when you grew up. That was not the case.
It's true.
When you look at stats, 27% of prisoners in London jail are Muslims.
Yep.
Where the population's only 6%.
That's right.
You hear the arguments about Sharia law, what they're saying. You hear your fellow who you've spoken to before, you guys have collaborated before, Tommy Robinson. He makes his arguments on what's going on with, what do you call it, with
Grooming
UK.
gangs.
Yeah. And then I look at some of the tweets. Here's a couple of the tweets that you had for people reacting to you because you were going strong to what was going on in UK. And you said, if you don't believe in the way the system that UK has, get out. I don't care who you are.
Correct.
You were very clear about it.
Correct.
You were very thorough about
Correct.
it. The response came back to you from the Muslim community, and it wasn't pretty. They were attacking you, right?
Yep.
And one of your response here that I have on the tweet, it says, Islam hate comes from Muslims who think they have to defend the disgusting actions that other Muslims commit instead of admitting that a religion can be perfect and people are not.
Yep.
Muslim must condemn the disgusting child openly and verbally, or the entire religion will be done. And then you respond back, Muslims who refuse to understand the Quran Islamophobia instead of addressing the serious issue is only going to garner reassessment. These grooming gangs would not be tolerated in an Islamic country. It's time for Muslims to stand up against all. And then there's more of these that I can read.
Yep.
Okay. And even to go back on what happened when the comments they made about Jesus Christ, you remember that as a Muslim, you said, I will never forget these scumbags for disgracing Jesus Christ, right? You've been a Muslim now for what, 2 years? I want to say 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. How much do you link that to the issues that UK is facing?
So the UK does have a problem where a lot of the culture is being eroded, and it's being eroded by an Islamic immigration. And this is going to make Muslims mad when I say it, but I understand why the native Brits feel threatened by that and are unhappy with that. When you talk about crime statistics, it's difficult because you can do the same thing with black people in the United States, but black people are a part of the United States. It's seen as racist to say that they're a lower percentage of the population, but they commit more of the crime. You can do the same with black people in the United States, but black people live here and they're always going to live here. I like to be ultra realistic about all things. And I like the idea of Britain retaining its culture and feeling like England. A lot of this that happens in the UK isn't from Muslims particularly. It's actually from Christians from Africa. A lot of it's third worlders. A lot of it's black youths inside of London who do most of this, the majority of it. But there are first world Islamic nations which are much safer than any Western nation. So you have a lot of third world Christians which are coming in committing heinous crimes. The Southport killer, he was from Rwanda, I believe he's a Christian family, and he killed 4 or 5 little girls to death recently. That's what caused all the riots. There's a whole bunch of Christians who are people coming from the third world which are committing crimes as well. That's one of the reasons England's collapsing right now. There is a wealth flight. Everyone with money is leaving. And you know what's funny? They're leaving because of crime and Islam, and guess where they're leaving to? Dubai. All of them. So it's not an Islam problem. It's a crime problem. It's a unsafe streets. It's a government you can't trust. It's two-tier policing. That's what they're running from. I'll be honest with you. It's actually interesting when we attach Islam to these things. If you go to the UAE or Qatar or Bahrain, these countries have extremely strict immigration policies. They're extremely strict about Islamization and extremism and radicalization. And these countries are some of the most beautiful countries in the world to live in, and they're extremely safe. So I think the problem that we have with Europe and the UK specifically was actually summed up by somebody who knows the problem better than I, and it was the UAE foreign minister. Did you ever see what he said? Yes. The UAE foreign minister. Find his video where he talks about the Islamization of Western nations. And he's saying that you're allowing extremism to foster in your countries because you think you know Islam better than we do. And we don't allow these ideologies in our own Islamic nations, and you're allowing them in the West. And you think you can... right there. Let's play this video.
There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
What do you think about that message? Well, you could say he's not a real Muslim. I guess that's what the Muslims of Great Britain would do, because they said that to me when I said that any Muslim who is not outraged by the crimes committed by Muslims is part of the problem. And this is the identity politics problem. The Muslims who complain that Islam is hated in the West, they're making it worse by sticking up for grooming gangs and serial murderers. I don't care what race or religion you are. If you're killing little girls, you're a scumbag. And in an Islamic nation, you would face the death penalty. So I don't care if it doesn't make me a real Muslim for that. I don't care. But I will be honest. I'll be very honest. What he said is extremely interesting. Because when I say these things online, I get no pushback and no hate from the Gulf Arabs. I get no pushback and no hate from the first world Muslims. None of that. It's only from the extremists. And the extremists are all living in Bradford. They're all living in the UK. It's really interesting that the most extreme points of view I get for the things I say about Islam are from England. It's never from the Islamic or the Arabic world. I saw another really interesting thing, actually. I'd like someone to find it. It was a post I saw on Twitter from a Pakistani guy. And he said, I'm from Pakistan. I live in Islamabad. And I was recently in Birmingham. And it felt more Islamic. And it was more backward thinking than anything you would see in Pakistan. He said Islamabad is a far more liberal place to live than Birmingham, UK. He's saying the Pakistanis who are still in Islamabad are less Islamic and less extreme about things than those inside of Birmingham, UK. And as I'm only 2.5 years into Islam, I don't know all of the ins and outs. There's other people who know it better than me.
PBD is a slime ball for trying to equate all knife crime incidents in Europe with Muslims. Again, Andrew, to his credit, as someone who is from the UK, corrected him by saying the majority of knife crime incidents in Britain are carried out by non-Muslims. PBD seems very bothered about Mohammed being the #1 boy's name in the UK. Patrick disturbingly seems to express a lot of jealousy towards Muslims for simply existing. Scam artist PBD then framed it as if Muslims were angered by Andrew Tate for calling out the grooming scandal in the UK. This is completely false. PBD selectively read out Tate's tweets to try to back up this false claim, but conveniently left out the main statement Tate made that resulted in pushback from Muslims, and that was Andrew stupidly labelling this evil act of grooming as Islamic crimes. Muslims were mad because that statement is an oxymoron. There is no such thing as an Islamic crime. It's not possible for those two words to exist side by side, nor were any of those sick groomers doing those vile acts in the name of Islam. At this point, I'm not sure if PBD is a bigot in disguise or just embarrassingly ignorant. The same goes for Andrew Tate, as they just kept debunking their own baseless arguments. PBD claimed Muslims make up 6% of the UK population, but 27% of the British prison population, which Tate agreed with. But Tate also claimed, like the far-right Islamophobes he's trying to get on side, that the UK has a two-tier policing system. So which is it? Are the police treating white non-Muslims unfairly, or are the prisons packed with Muslims because there's no two-tier policing in the UK? At least get your fake stories straight before you proceed to grift on your podcast, guys. The fact is, Andrew Tate is an opportunist and a con man. He saw Tommy Robinson raking in the money from lying about white people being oppressed, lying about Muslim immigration, lying about two-tier policing in the UK, and lying about Islam in the West. And of course, Andrew wanted a piece of the pie and started repeating the same garbage talking points to get Tommy's fan base on side so he could sell them his online courses. Andrew then stated that UK culture is being eroded by Islamic immigration. Why not immigration in general, or illegal immigration? Why, as a Muslim, are you specifically saying Islamic immigration and then complaining about Muslims being mad at you for such a dumb statement? Tate just kept on embarrassingly contradicting himself. One minute he said Islam is a problem in the UK, then he said it's not an Islam problem. After he blamed Muslim immigration, he then went on to blame third world Christian migrants. Tate continued in this vein when he spoke about Gulf nations being strict on extremism and immigration, and thus being much safer. But Tate failed to mention that the countries he listed, UAE, Bahrain and Qatar, are not only run by Muslims, but their legal systems also rely on Islamic Sharia law. Whereas European countries are run by non-Muslims, and the far-right demographic Tate is desperately trying to appeal to hate the mention of Sharia law. So maybe Europe needs to follow the example of the Middle East in terms of how their leaders operate, as well as tightening up their laws to be more Islamic. PBD and Tate further defeated their own idiotic arguments when they played a clip of a UAE politician. The UAE guy is not a Muslim scholar, and we all know the UAE politicians, just like the politicians anywhere in the world, are crooked and follow the money. This UAE politician doesn't know Islam better than a scholar simply because he's Arab, especially since the UAE are politically aligned with the anti-Islam regime of Israel. At this point, Andrew Tate sounds like a fed as well as a clown. He said Muslims should be outraged by the crimes committed by Muslims, as if we're not, and he made the false claim that UK Muslims are sticking up for grooming gang members and extremists, and that is why Islamophobia exists in Britain. Any true Muslim, no matter where in the world they are based, are completely against any form of radicalisation or grooming. So much so, hundreds of Muslim ministers gave religious sermons across the UK speaking against these horrific crimes. I challenge Andrew Tate to name one Muslim in the UK who doesn't condemn grooming gangs or extremism. Name one, just one, so we can assure that person is shunned from our community and reported to the authorities. This idiot is making false accusations that Muslims condone groomers and extremists out of thin air to cover up the fact he got backlash for trying to swindle his way into gaining a far-right following whilst making stupid statements that contradict contradict Islam in the process of doing so. Tate claimed he doesn't get pushback from Muslims in Arab nations for his online bigotry, and it's only Western Muslims that oppose him. Well, firstly, Arabs make up only a minority of Muslims worldwide, around 15%, so you should be more concerned about how the majority are reacting to your foolishness, not the minority. And secondly, you are literally degrading Muslims in the West while siding with people like Tommy Robinson who hate Islam. What do you expect other than pushback? And now you're trying to cover up the fact Muslims called you out for this by labelling British Muslims as extremists because your grift backfired on you. And as far as Tate quoting a Pakistani guy from Islamabad saying Birmingham in the UK felt more Islamic, as if that term is a negative description and that Islamabad is less Islamic and less extreme, this is yet another example of how Andrew does not know what the word means. Tate equates the word Islamic with extremism like a bigoted moron. Something or somewhere being more Islamic is a compliment. It means it is cleaner, safer, holy, more godly, more civilized, more pure. If Birmingham is not as good as a city as Islamabad, then that is the fault of the non-Muslims that run the UK, not the fault of the Muslims who live there under non-Muslim rule. Let's watch the next clip.
I believe every country and every race, every identity has a right to their land. I believe that. I believe that the British people have a right to have an England for British people that feels like England. You can argue what a British person is. Perhaps the definition may be slightly changing, but you would argue that Great Britain has a Christian heritage. And I don't think there's anything wrong as a Muslim to say that Great Britain is a Christian country. It's always been a Christian country and it should remain a Christian country. I believe that. I like that they let me visit. That's fine. I would never go to the UAE and say this should be a Christian nation. I would never do that. So why do we do it the other way around? It just seems hypocritical.
But that's the point, though. That's the point what a lot of people are making. If you want to live in a place that majority is Muslim, go there. You can move there. If you want to live in a place that's got the traditions, let them stay there, right? That's the whole argument about nationalism. Like, if you're proud of your country, no, you shouldn't be proud of your country.
But that only applies to white people. And I'm one of the champions of this, even though the hardcore racists on Twitter hate me because they call me mulatto and mixed race and all these things. I don't care. I'm going to champion for it anyway. Only white people are not allowed to love themselves, love their race, and love their countries. Everyone else is. White people are the only ones who could do it. If anyone else flies a flag or says we're from wherever, or we're this color, or we're this religion, we want it, it's fine. When white people do it, it's instantly demonized. White people are the only people who are expected to give up their lands. White people are being replaced in their host nations. That's obvious for me to see. I don't think anyone can argue against that point. People try.
But
people
that's also a fair argument, though.
No, it's a very fair argument, but that upsets people. Or they deny it's happening. But it is happening. Guess what I saw in the car on the way here? A terror attack in Germany. A car attack. You see it?
Yep, this morning.
A Muslim ran over a bunch of white people in Germany this morning. But the white people in Germany can't band together to fight against it because then they are what?
Racist. When it comes to the was it the Pakistani gangs?
Yep.
It's as if this group is protected. They're covering it up and they don't want it to come to light. Why would they hide the fact that these guys were Pakistani?
What they're afraid of is they're afraid of racism and of nationalism and highlighting the problems amongst a certain demographic and subgroup because they feel like it's going to build resentment, and it will. So their solution, and it will build resentment, and I'm not saying that resentment's wrong, it's quite rightful resentment. So their solution is, let's try and hide the problem. But I would argue that one of the key elements, one of the key backbones to a multicultural society is at least fair treatment under the law. How can you expect all these different types of people to live together if they're not treated fairly under the law? How does Dubai survive? Dubai's 80% immigration from people from all around the world, all different colors. Why does everyone get along? Why does everyone go there? Fair treatment under the law. It's a harsh law, but we're all treated the same, right? So in the UK, now we have a double problem. You have the problem of the natural resentment for the results of actions of people who don't share British values, on top of a double standard in the law they're using to try and hide the issue. This is a time bomb.
Have you ever seen Dominik Tarczynski from Poland?
Yes.
He's being interviewed and he's being asked about why Poland has the lowest crime, lowest unemployment. And here's his answer, Rob. Can you play this clip?
How many refugees has Poland taken?
Not one.
0.
And you're proud of that?
If you're asking me about Muslims illegal immigration, none, not even one will come to Poland. Not even one if it's illegal. We took over 2 million Ukrainians who are working, who are peaceful in Poland. We will not receive even one Muslim because this is what we promised.
But I asked not about illegal
failed.
immigrants. I asked about refugees. And Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission President, says that you're racist. You sound proud of the fact that you haven't taken any refugees.
Of course, because this is what our people are expecting from our government. That's number one. This is why our government was elected. But this is why Poland is so safe. This is the reason why we had not even one terrorist attack. Look at the streets in Poland. And we can be called populists, nationalists, racists. I don't care. I care about my family and about my country.
Rob, you can pause it. Go for it.
Islam is not an excuse to break border laws. I don't know why some Muslims seem to believe it is. That's why Islam has such a terrible name. You can't say I'm a Muslim, so let me in. I don't have to obey border laws. I don't think that Islam is an excuse to disobey the laws of a country. I don't think it's an excuse to disobey border laws, because it's not an excuse to disobey the border laws in Dubai or Qatar or Bahrain or all these other Islamic nations. You think you can rock up to the border of an Islamic nation and say, well, I'm Muslim, so just let me in, I ain't got a passport? I don't think so. I would argue that some of the strictest border controls ever are in that region, which is why they have such a problem trying to relocate refugees and these kind of things. So it's really insane that the white Christian liberal will argue that Muslim refugees have an instant pass to their Christian countries when they don't have an instant pass to Islamic countries. It doesn't matter what their religion is. Countries need a border. And my Islamic faith, I don't feel, counteracts my rationality in understanding that countries need a border. And then you have this identity politics, which is tearing the fabric of society apart, because when a Muslim will do something disgusting and heinous, like be involved in a grooming gang, instead of being disavowed by other Muslims, all the other Muslims seem to start screaming about Islamophobia. And then you wonder why the average white Christian has a problem with Islam. I'm the absolute opposite. Yes, I am a Muslim, yes. But if you're in a grooming gang, I think you deserve the punishment, the full punishment of the law. In fact, I would wish you to get caught in an Islamic country and see what actual punishment is. I completely understand, as a white Christian in the UK, why you would feel threatened by Islam. I understand it. And when Muslims go, you don't have any reason to fear us. Well, he's in a grooming gang, kids. Yo, you're racist. Like, how can you not understand the concerns of these people? And why aren't you doing anything to address those concerns? If you're a guest in someone's nation, shouldn't you try and address their concerns? I would argue that the Muslims inside of the UK, if they had respect for the country they were in, if they had respect for the native population and for Christianity, should be doing a pretty good job, or should be trying to make it clear that they are not a threat. Instead, they walk around and try their very best to scare everyone all the time. And then they wonder why Islamophobia exists. And as a Muslim, I will say that because it's obvious. But when I say that, they turn on me and they attack me. But it doesn't matter what they say. It matters what God says. So a lot of the problems in the UK, yes, you can attribute some of them to Islam. But truthfully, you can attribute most of them to just simply third world individuals arriving and them having no plan to integrate these people into society. That's the problem with Europe as a whole.
No one that I know from the Muslim community wants to overthrow the UK or the West, nor do we have the manpower or the numbers to do so. Andrew is wrong when he calls the UK a Christian country, because it's actually an atheist country. And no real Muslim would be so adamant that Islam does not grow like Andrew insists upon the UK. This is why Muslims doubt you, because you sound like a double agent. Again, Andrew is lying when he said white people are being replaced in their host nations. The reason Muslims, as a 6% minority population, have such a religious impact in Britain is because we practice our faith in such a dedicated manner. Why are people threatened by this? We just want to live peacefully. No one is being replaced. That is a paranoid delusion peddled by race baiters to get the people who fall for it to give them money. And as far as Tate's argument that he wouldn't go to Dubai and ask them to become Christian, the UAE, due to foreign immigration, is only around 50% Muslim, and you don't hear us crying about it. Tate himself admitted that the UAE is made up of around 80% of immigrants, many of whom are Westerners. Again, you don't hear Muslims complaining about this. It is what it is. But suspiciously, why are you as a Muslim advocating so strongly for Christianity, a religion in its modern version that preaches the worship of multiple gods? You're literally committing a sin by advocating for this, and that's why Muslims are correcting your mistake publicly. PBD also chimed in with the same fear-mongering nonsense, framing it as if Muslims are taking over and stating that they should go live in a Muslim country. The irony is that this bigot himself is an Irani immigrant. Tate further exposed himself as the spineless grifter he is when he said that despite getting racial abuse from far-right nationalists, he still champions white nationalism. I guess some people will do anything to stay relevant. This recent phenomenon of white people having no power is a complete lie. Let's be honest here, white people run the world and they're not victims on a collective level. Andrew Tate then spread more lies about a Muslim being involved in an extremist attack in Germany on the day he recorded this podcast, when in reality the attack was carried out by a 40-year-old German non-Muslim. And not only that, Tate again, along with PBD's co-host, shamelessly framed this as if Muslims condone such things. Let me be clear, as Muslims we denounce all acts of extremism and grooming, because anyone that commits a crime against humanity is not practicing Islam in their actions whatsoever. And let's not forget, it was also non-Muslims that covered up the heinous crimes of these groomers. PBD played yet another clip of a shady politician to back up his bigotry, this time of the Polish variety. As you saw, the moron they showed in the clip stated Poland is successful due to a lack of Muslim immigration. Poland also has a lack of Hindu immigration and Chinese immigration and American immigration, etc., etc. In fact, there are currently more Muslims in Poland than all three of those groups I just mentioned combined. So this far-right politician is on the same grift as PBD and Tate. And since when did we blindly start trusting politicians? Aren't they part of the very same matrix Andrew Tate is always complaining about? I personally have nothing against Poland or Polish people, but the fact is there's less crime in Saudi Arabia than there is in Poland. And in Saudi, there is nothing but Muslims from all over the world 24/7, 365 days a year. Andrew made the foolish generalised claim that some Muslims think Islam is an excuse to break border laws. The common sense position to take would be that people who break border laws generally don't do so out of religious affiliation, but more so out of personal circumstances. Tate then continued to contradict himself by lambasting the same white Christians he was defending for letting Muslim refugees into their countries. What Andrew failed to mention is Western nations invading and waging war in Muslim Muslim countries results in asylum seekers and refugees, that they have a responsibility to relocate because it's their fault those people are displaced in the first place. Once again, Andrew adamantly pushed the lie that Muslims condone grooming gangs in order to make excuses for non-Muslims being Islamophobic, so much so he correlated this with why white Christians fear Islam. This guy sounds so stupid. There are hundreds of thousands of white Muslims in the UK. He's right about one thing though. Those groomers should be brought to justice in an Islamic country so that true justice is done. Tate then proceeded to call Muslims in the UK guests in Britain when the majority of us are born here, and claimed we don't respect the UK and that we walk around scaring people all the time, in his words. Well, Andrew, the UK wants to extradite you back here to face legal consequences for your supposed crimes against white British women. Maybe you should take your own advice in regards to respecting the laws and come back here to face the music. Sellout Tate kept flapping his gums and even went as far as attributing the problems in the UK to Islam as a whole. Absolutely disgraceful. Let's watch the last clip where this fence-sitting coward throws Palestinians under the bus whilst making excuses for Israel.
You say you want to be president of the UK, Prime Minister of the UK. Yeah. What would you do to solve world peace in Israel, Palestine? What solutions do you have?
Well, I really believe Trump was going to bring peace to the world. And I think he did a pretty good job in stopping the killing between Israel and Gaza. I'm not saying he has all the solutions. I'm not saying everything he's done is perfect, but he certainly stopped the killing. And that's got to be the first thing you do, right? Things have to be done incrementally. It's unfair to expect a leader to come in and have a complete full solution to everything head to toe. You have to do things in increments. And increment one is to stop people dying, I would argue. So I think for that reason alone, he's done a good job in Israel and Gaza. I think if anyone can get it done, it's Donald Trump. Trump's a hero. Trump has saved the world.
Trump has been very pro-Israel. And so he's been very pro-Bibi.
Correct.
And matter-of-factly, Tate. So do you think he's wrong on that, being so supportive of Israel?
You know, this whole Jewish question thing is actually an interesting one. You know, it's actually kind of frustrating for me because when I came out of jail, I did Piers Morgan, and I told Piers that what was happening in Gaza was a massacre. And this was on like October 9th, like 2 days after.
You said genocide.
Genocide. I said it was unfair what was happening. This was before it became like widespread. This was only a couple days after. And I was told not to say that. I was, that's going to get you in a lot of trouble. But that's what I believed, so I said it at the time. And there's a lot of people online who are fervently anti-Jew and are very anti-Semitic. And I know who these people are. And you know who these people are, a lot of them. Sometimes, yeah, well, so no, sometimes they have a point of view, and sometimes they just go way too far with it. So I think this whole argument is kind of two-pronged. The first prong is that there are people in the world who blame the Jews for absolutely everything, and that is pathetic. And these people think that they worked out the secret of the world, and they're based, and they blame Jewish people for everything. They're like, oh, but that's the Jews. And if you try and point this out, you're instantly a Mossad agent. Even I get this. After defending Palestine and risking my life, because they could have locked me back up and I was told not to, they're still not happy with me because I don't go far enough with blaming the rain on the Jews. So there's the psycho side of it. Mm-hmm. But as a rational person who likes to see both sides of the argument, I would also argue it is interesting that it seems the only influence over the American government that we're not scared about or we don't measure is the Israeli influence of the American government. It seems they do have some control over the American government. They do lobby heavily, and nobody talks about it in a negative way. Whereas if the Chinese do it or the Russian do it, there seems to be a big problem. It doesn't seem to be measured when Israel does it, and nobody seems to be concerned by it. Now, whether that's a good or bad thing, you can get someone on more qualified than me to discuss. There's people more qualified than me. I would argue as a rational, intelligent individual that the American government should be pertinently aware of all influences that are put on it. Shouldn't you measure them? I'm not saying even stop them, but shouldn't you know? So I understand that Israel seems to be the only country that can influence American politics without being checked. I understand that. I understand that's strange. I agree that should be measured. That's true. There's definitely a lot of irrationality on both sides. That's what I would say about that whole subject. But that subject seems to get people instantly into black and white camps, and both sides can semi-have a point. For the people who are truly fearful of Israel and truly fearful of Jewish influence, you hinder yourselves by not being open to rational conversations, by not being invited on speaking podcasts, by not being open to ideas, because you don't accept that not every single thing on the planet is the Jews. Because when me, a half-black Muslim who defended Palestine, is being accused of being a Mossad agent, you may have gone too far. It looks like I work for the Jews. So what can you do?
Well, Tate, you're hired. Don't worry. I'll get you.
I was about to
get you a discount. I'm going to get you a 10% discount. I got you.
Get the yarmulke in here right now.
I wouldn't get one. We'll bring Tristan in.
I was about to say, if I was hired, where's my money?
Save that money, Tate. Save that money.
Because they ain't paid on yet. You know? But
we're going to get you another Protect Philippe.
No self-proclaimed alpha male simps for another man like Andrew Tate does for Donald Trump. Trump hasn't stopped the killing in Gaza as Tate claimed. Israel is still doing so under the guise of a fake ceasefire. In fact, Trump has funded Israel the same as Biden did. When PBD's slimy sidekick pressed Tate on the fact that Trump is pro-Israel, Tate crumbled in agreement and even hesitated in calling what Israel did in Palestine a genocide like he previously did on Piers Morgan's show. The majority of people who oppose Israel are not anti-Jewish, they're anti-Zionist. Zionist. It's not only Muslims that hold this view, but people from all backgrounds and walks of life, even pro-Palestinian Jewish people, many of whom that I've hosted on my channel. Andrew Tate is a full-blown hypocrite. He was scared to offend PBD's sidekick with the straightforward truths about Israel, yet on his own streams with his brother, he blatantly disrespects Jewish people. It sounds like Andrew is now accusing the pro-Palestinian crowd of calling him a Mossad agent because he's not anti-Semitic enough. Well, it could be because you openly support pro-Israeli agitators like Tommy Robinson and Donald Trump, or maybe because you back anti-Muslim nationalism in the West, which is a Zionist propaganda tactic, or maybe because you go on the PBD podcast and tell hateful lies about Islam whilst the bigots you sit with laugh and pat you on the back. At the very least, Tate politely and timidly suggested Israeli lobbies seem to have some control over the US government, as he put it. He then proceeded to take a neutral stance on Israel by saying he's not sure if Israel controlling the US government is a good thing or a bad thing, or if they should be stopped. Tate also said there is irrationality on both sides of the Israel-Palestine conflict and that both sides have a point. This is definitely a different opinion from before. I do not respect anyone who takes a neutral stance on hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians and children being wiped out mercilessly, as this is a cowardly stance to take. Andrew Tate comes across as a very compromised individual these days that only seems interested in making money through cheating people. But at least PBD's Zionist co-host promised Tate he was hired, which made Tate very happy as he'd do anything for that bag. Even sell his soul, heck, even sell out God. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join my free Telegram group via the link in the description, where we as Muslims can speak freely and without censorship about issues like this. And remember to like, subscribe and become a channel member for access to exclusive content. Until next time, inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.